This is Kim Meyer, host of Choose to Rise. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
This is Liz Colburn, host of The Morning Uplift here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you are done with this episode, I hope you'll come back and check out my show, The Morning Uplift, where we talk about finding your beauty in the journey. A new show comes out twice a month on the first and third Mondays. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of The Morning Uplift. Thank you again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Today's verse of the day comes from Ephesians 5:33. However, each one of you must love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. Good morning. Welcome to Verse of the Day, presented by Public House Media. I'm Baxter Colburn, your host. I'm so excited that you're here for this episode. If you are celebrating and coming down from your Valentines Day high, I hope you had a great Valentine's Day with those that you love. Maybe you had a Galentine's Day for those of you that celebrate Galentine's Day with some of your gals. If you got some good lunch or dinner or brunch with your gals, I hope you had a good time. But mostly, I just hope you spent time with those that show you love and make you feel special. Our verse of the day is very exciting, and it's going to be a little bit more centered towards married couples. But if you're single or if you're not married, don't skip the episode and come back in a couple of days when the new one comes out. Don't do that, please, because there's some tidbits in this that I want you to catch as well. Before we get into the episode, I do want to make mention that the show is available on Apple Podcasts. You can find it on publichousemedia.org. And of course, the show is available on Facebook and on Instagram. Just go search for Verse of the Day Podcast or Verse Pod on Instagram. Let's lean in to see what God has to tell us about this verse today. Our verse of the day is from the book of Ephesians, and the book of Ephesians is written by the Apostle Paul. He wrote this book to the believers in the church at Ephesus. This episode, as I mentioned, is very much directed towards those that are in a married relationship, but there are some very key tidbits that I want my non-married listeners to also take away. So if you're about to go skip this show and go listen to a different show, please don't, because there's some really interesting things that I hope that you take away from this verse. Let's look at this from a couple of different angles. So a couple of weeks ago, this verse came up in my men's group, and I had kind of loosely heard this verse and was interested to see what was going to be talked about this. We were talking about marriage and love in our men's group, and this verse came up. And there was a video that we watched with a guest speaker, and the guest speaker did a really good job of unpacking a lot of verses from the book of Ephesians. And he put together just this incredible presentation with so many of these aha and or duh moments that as I was sitting there watching this video, I was like, oh my goodness. I'm like, that makes so much more sense. And I have to share some of these with you because I hope you kind of have the same realizations that I did. Now, looking at this very first part, it says, however, each one of you also must love his wife as he loves himself. That goes in a lot of different directions, right? The first thing that I think of when I read that is self-care, taking care of your body, taking care of your mind. For me, I have a journal that I write in every day. I've got the Best Self journal, and it's really helpful for me to stay on track with what I need to do. It allows me to write down my daily gratitude and plan out my day. It's not so much a planner as much as it is something that helps me track what I want to do on a daily basis. And some people saying, well, that's a planner, Baxter. But if you knew what the self journal was, you would understand that it's so much more than that. You can go to bestselfithink.com and check it out more if you want to do so. But it's amazing because by me taking a couple of minutes every morning and every night and throughout the day, obviously I'll do my tracking of what I'm doing, I'm making myself better. I'm building my mental stability up, and I'm growing as an individual, so that way I can be my best self for my family, for my friends, and for my work, and ultimately for whatever items God might put in my life that day that maybe weren't so expected or so planned out, right? As God often likes to do for us. So where am I getting at with this? So men, as you read that verse, that first part, it says, love your wife. And the reason that the men are told to love their wife is because think about any woman in your life, or your mother, or any family member, or your wife, or your significant other. Think about how much they spend just pouring into you, right? How much love do they put into you and into those around them? See, women are just internally programmed to love. That's what they do. Those mother instincts, those care about you, do anything they can to make you feel better, just anything they possibly can to show love to you. And their love tank can get empty pretty fast because all they're doing is loving, and more often than not, they're not getting it back. So that's where we as men are called, especially in this verse, to love our wives, because we need to show love back to them. And some of those ways are identifying what their love language is, whether that's quality time or acts of service or gifts or physical touch, whatever it might be. You need to make sure you're filling your wife's love tank, because they do such a great job of pouring out love to everyone else, but they themselves don't usually take time to sit back and fill their own love tank. And that's where you, as the husband or the man in the relationship, come in, because your duty is to fill your wife's love tank with doing various things to showcase how much you love her and how much you appreciate what she's doing. Now, on the flip side, for the women, for the wives, listen to the second part of the verse, and it said, and the wife must respect her husband. Notice how, like I just said, the women are not commanded to love their husbands, because they already do it. It's built into their DNA, so God's not going to be redundant. He's not into that type of thing. But what he does say is wives must respect their husband. And respect is interesting, because think about it. As a guy, where do you find respect? You love feeling respected at your job, in your community, maybe your sports team. But how often do we sometimes come home after we're done getting respect in all those areas, and we don't feel respected? We don't feel appreciated at home, where truthfully it should matter the most, right? And see, this is why God spoke through Paul, and through the words of Paul, we see Paul write saying, wives must respect their husbands. Husbands need to feel validated, and they need to feel like the work that they're doing for their family is respected. After all, the husband is pouring all this love into their wife, and so the wife must reciprocate that love with respect back to the husband. But this also does have to be earned, in my opinion. This is something that don't just give away respect. You need to earn it. I'm a firm believer in earning respect. My wife and I struggle with this all the time. There are many times where I don't always fulfill her needs that she has as far as reciprocating that love back to her, and there are times where she's not always the most respectful back to me. But because both of us aren't doing what the other person needs, therefore that causes tension, therefore that causes sometimes disconnect in our marriage. And when there's disconnect, there isn't harmony, and the marriage can't flow and not be as strong as it's supposed to be. So this is where identifying this verse and identifying what we're being called to do is so important. Men, love your wife. All they do is love all day, every day. The least you can do is love them back and fill back that love cup that they just pour out of every single day. And for women, respect your husband. Show them that you care. Validate their their efforts and their work and the time that they're putting into the relationship. This is a fight that my wife and I are moving away from, and we are showing such great progress in. And that's just me being transparent with you. And some of you might be sitting here going, wow, you don't need to necessarily share all the ins and outs of your marriage, but I want to share it with you because it's important and it's so crucial for you to know that everybody goes through it. You know, everyone can have a great social media marriage or a great social media relationship or even a great public marriage or relationship. But what happens behind the closed doors is what really matters. Are you loving and respecting each other? Are you treating each other the way you're supposed to be treating each other? Are you doing the things that God calls and commands us to do? And if you can't answer those questions with a resounding yes, then there's some major problems that need to be addressed. And that's where this verse comes in today. I want to just do a quick reference here to a great commentary that I found. And this kind of just wraps up very similar to what I was just talking about. It's from the Asbury commentary. And it says, similarly, the husband's obligation to his wife is illustrated by the author in two ways, Paul. First, it is patterned after Christ's love for his church. How much did Christ love the church? He loved it so much that he gave himself to make the church holy and radiant. Also, husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. After all, persons do not despair or neglect their own bodies, but feed and care for them. Therefore, as Christ gave himself to nurture his body, the bride church, so the husband must give himself to nurture his bride. That just really hits me deep as I think about trying to provide and trying to care about for my wife on a daily basis. I hope you took away something from this verse today. I hope that those words of the Apostle Paul really spoke to you the way it spoke to my heart a couple of weeks ago, because this verse has changed my life and changed my marriage for the better. And there's so many other commentaries, there's so many other thoughts and feelings about this verse, but I really encourage you, the book of Ephesians is just packed full of so many incredible things, especially when it comes to relationships. If you're in a marriage that's struggling right now, go to the book of Ephesians. If you're thinking about getting engaged, if you're a single person, go and read some of these verses. You will learn so much, and you will be so much better prepared because of it. Thank you so much for listening to the verse of the day. I hope this verse spoke to you. I hope you enjoy what we're doing here at Verse of the Day. If you do, I'd love to hear about it. Send us a message on Facebook or Instagram, and I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.